All right, let's go. So, thank you for inviting me. Today, we're going to learn wait a second. Okay, all right. Today, we're going to learn about a subject. Usually, I try to not to put too much text on the presentations because if there's too much text, there's too much reading. However, since today's subject is kind of not so much of the word, maybe not difficult, but it's a different type of subject, and it's wrongly based on one letter of the Rebbe. Actually, the Rebbe wrote many letters on this subject, and there's a whole book on it in Spanish. I know the title in Spanish. I don't know the title in Hebrew. I'm sorry, in English. I don't know the title in Hebrew either. It's also in Hebrew. I don't know the title, but it's about Science and Torah. The whole book basically talks about this kind of subjects. It's very interesting. Letters of the Rebbe. Most of them were written around the 60s, the 1960s. So we're going to learn a few parts, not the whole letter. It's like a long thing to read with you. And I tried to cut and paste the most important parts. I'm nobody to actually cut and paste the words of the Rebbe. That's not my job, but whatever. We can't read the whole thing because actually we're not learning about the whole thing. Even though the subject is Torah and science, and we are really going to learn about this, but there's more to it. The reason why I actually spoke with Angelique, and we chose this subject is because there's one very important point that we're going to learn on these subjects, besides the fact of science, etc., which is interesting in itself. And the point is, okay, what about Bnei Noach? What about the belief that a Ben Noach or Bas Noach, man, woman is the same thing, should actually have regarding the whole story of the creation in the Torah? You know, science says one thing about how long the universe has been around, and Torah says a very different thing. We just started year 5,785, just a few months ago. So wait a second, I don't know. If you go to school, if you go to museums, etc., it's going to tell you about thousands of millions of years. So where do Bnei Noach stand? Okay, you can say Jews have to believe on whatever the Torah says, but what about Bnei Noach? Of course, they also have to believe on what the Torah says. There's no doubt about it. However, when it comes to really understanding it, it becomes sometimes difficult. Like you face the whole world around you, and I also do, of course. But whatever, my faith maybe makes me easier. I just say, I don't understand what you're talking about, and that's it. But it's not so easy for Bnei Noach to deal with the world, with the way most of you, probably all of you, were actually raised. And suddenly, because the rabbi said that there are 5,000 years in the world, yeah, okay, the rabbi, but what does the rabbi know? Maybe the rabbi doesn't understand anything. Yeah, he just repeats what the Torah says. But what about real knowledge? In order to understand why I chose a letter of the Rebbe, is because actually the Rebbe was a scientist himself. He learned in Paris, in the Sorbonne, and he learned also in Berlin, science in the 1920s. At a time that you can imagine, if you know a little bit of science, I'm not a scientist, but I like the subject, whatever. If you know a little bit, most of the great brains in the world, physics and chemistry, etc., they were also learning in those places at those times. So the Rebbe knew what he was talking about. It's not just a stubborn races of rabbis that don't know anything. No. This is real stuff. However, I'm not a scientist. I learned electronics, so I know what I'm talking about a little bit, not so much. But however, the point of the class is going to be, besides the letter, to understand what's the difference between Torah and science. Do they contradict or not? And basically, where are Bnei Noach on all of this? So let's start. No more introduction. Let's move on. First of all, the story. I told you already, lots of reading today. I'm not going to read the whole story. I suppose you can read, so you do it yourself. The point of the story is there's a guy called Achilas. There are some arguments about who this guy really was. Some people say he was Onkelos, which was a non-Jew that converted from the Roman Empire. Some people say not, two different guys. Whatever the case is, the uncle of this Achilas was actually one of the Roman emperors. And they had a whole conversation. About Judaism. Achilas wanted to actually convert to Judaism. And the reason why I'm bringing this story is just to understand why did Achilas want to convert. What's going on over here? So again, imagine Roman Empire, Hadrian over here, it says Hadrian, Emperor Hadrian, so you can figure out the times, or you can look it up, whatever. And the point is, look, the Romans actually, they killed so many Jews. The Jews were so low at those times, lowest of the nations, and you want to convert? And Achilas answered his uncle, yeah, I want to convert, because the least among them knows how the Holy One created the world. And you know what? They also know how long it has been since the world was created. Go ask any regular Jew, any regular child, actually, what he's talking about is a child, and ask him, what year are we standing? And he's going to tell you, 5,000, etc. And he's a little boy. And he knows already when the world was created, how long the world has been around. So I want to convert to this nation. Whomever Achilas actually was, he ended up converting. There are many stories about Onkelos and this guy Achilas. Maybe he was the same guy, maybe wasn't. But the point over here is, we know, at least we claim, the Jews claim to know when the universe was created. And science is actually arguing, not Torah, within themselves, when the world was created. We're going to go back to Achilas later. So the first thing that the Rebbe actually talks about in this letter is, what's science? And again, the Rebbe knew what he was talking about. He was a scientist and he was actually an electrical engineer. And he learned, in big places, with big people. So what's science? I just copied what the dictionary says. So let's read it. Science, systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation. So we look around and we see the world. And we try to understand how it works. We experiment. And we test theories against the evidence we obtain. So we try things like, if I take a pencil, why is the pencil falling in my table? What's going on? I just leave it and it falls. Why? So science experiments, and it gives us theories, possible explanations, which is actually the second definition. What a theory is, a supposition of a system of ideas intended to explain something. For instance, why is the pencil following in my table? Does the pencil love the table? I don't think so. It's a theory, whatever, but difficult to prove. Especially one based on general principles independent of the thing to be explained. Okay, this is the dictionary definition of science and theory. According to this, and to be honest, modern science is basically based on these two ideas, and these are very strong and true, so to speak, ideas. According to these, we should ask ourselves, does science have certainty, and 100% truth about anything? The simple answer would be, we have so many medicines and they work, and we have so many great things, and we send rockets to Mars and whatever, the moon. Yeah. The truth is, no. Science has theories that work pretty well, very well, to the point that it allows us to get cured of so many diseases, Baruch Hashem, thank God, and to send rockets to Mars and the moon and whatever. However, that doesn't mean these are certainties. What do I mean? Let's see how the Rebbe writes. That's why I actually copied, because it's interesting to see the letters, the wording of the Rebbe himself. So how do we know things? How does science know things? At best, science can only speak in terms of theories, inferred from certain known facts and applied in the realm of the unknown. So we don't know really what's going on. We don't know why the pencil falls in the table, and we start thinking why. We make theories. Here science has two general methods of inference. The Rebbe over here is talking specifically, not so much about the pencil and the table. The Rebbe is talking about the age of the universe. How long is the universe around? So science doesn't really know. Nobody really knows. Like, nobody can tell you, I have the truth. We can only rely, so to speak, so much on one theory, on another theory. We can bring proofs regarding one theory or a different theory. But how do we really know? So the Rebbe explains there are two general ways of knowing in science when you have something that is impossible to know, because I can't ask anybody. The Torah says clearly that on two witnesses or three witnesses, the whole argument doesn't matter what it means, but on witnesses, we base ourselves on witnesses, and actually justice works everywhere like that. We base ourselves on witnesses. We believe the witnesses. They have to swear, or whatever the case is, but we believe them, and that's the way we know things. But of course, there's nobody over there to ask, when was the universe created? Were you there? Actually, that's the question that God asks Eof. When Job starts making strange questions, God asks him, were you there when I created the world? Actually, you were not there. So come on, you don't know what I'm talking about. This is what God says, Eof, Job. So again, we don't have witnesses, so we have to inference. And there are two ways. Method number one, interpolation. What does that mean? Doesn't mean the same thing as extrapolation, we will see in a minute, whereby knowing the reaction of under two extremes, extreme one, extreme two, we know what happens in these two extremes. We attempt to infer inside these extremes what the reaction might be at any point between the two. So you have point number one, point number two. I know the result of some experiment over here. I know the result of some experiment over here. So what's going on in the middle? That's interpolation. And then extrapolation, outside, whereby inferences are made beyond a known range. So we have a known range. Actually, we know this particular range, but we want to know what's going on beyond this range. And there's no way to measure that. Go ask somebody 1,000,000 years ago. There was nobody over there to ask. But today, he's not alive in any case. On the basis of certain variables, this word is very important, within the known range. So we have a range, we know how things work within these ranges, and then we want to know how things work outside of these ranges. For example, suppose we know the variables of a certain element within a temperature of range of 0 to 100, and on the basis of this, we estimate what the reaction might be, 101, 200, 2000, or whatever the case. This is called extrapolation. When we're talking about the age of the universe, this is the method we actually use to try to understand and to know how old the universe is through stones, etc., as we're going to see. Now, the Rebbe poses 4 different problems, 5 problems with using this method to understand how old is the universe. Problem number 1. These theories, any theory you want to say about the universe, have been advanced on the basis of observable data, important thing, during a relatively short period of time. Only a number of decades. At any rate, not more than a couple of centuries. So let's say we take an element in the creation, and through the analyzing, whatever the case is, the element, radioactivity, of whatever you want to analyze of this element, how long have you been analyzing this element? What do you want to say, 100 years? 200 years? Not more than that, certainly. Not more than that. So we want to find out what would happen, or what we assume happened with this element by analyzing 200 years at most of the life of this element. So let's say 5 5,000 million years ago, the same thing happened. Ooh, wait a second. Out of 200 observable time, whatever, you want to analyze such a... It's like saying, okay, I had a baby, and my baby measured 15 centimeters when he was born. Very nice. And then when he was, 2 years ago, he measured 1 meter. Wow, what nice. How long is going to be, how tall is he going to be when he is 200 years old? Wait a second. First of all, humans are not 200 years old. Second, you should know that there's a time that people just stop growing. That's it. 18, 19, 20, whatever. Ask a doctor, I'm not a doctor. But there's a point that we just stop growing. We don't continue growing. So it doesn't make any sense to extrapolate and say, since from the age 0 to the age 2, you were so long, and you grew up so much, then when you're 200 years ago, you're going to be 5 meters tall. No, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. Why? And I'm just going to go back a little bit. There was one word that I said it was important. Where was it? Variables. I don't know. Terms of inference, certain facts applied. Okay, I lost the word. Variables. What about the example that I gave about variables in the human being? You could say that we grow so much every single year. That's true. But that's only if the variables are exactly the same every single year. As soon as you change some variable, growth changes also. For instance, in the human being, for whatever reason, I'm not a doctor, so don't ask me, I don't know, but for whatever reason, something happens inside of us, in our body, that the body says, I'll stop growing. Actually, it's a disease. If a person doesn't stop growing, it's going to pass away. God forbid. But whatever, I'm not a doctor. So there's something happening, some variables actually change within us, and we stop growing. And that's it. So this is point number 1. We just measured whatever we use to understand how old is the universe. We measured a small amount of time, and we're trying to find out of a very, very long amount of time. Point number 2. On the basis of such relativity, small range of known, through by no means perfectly, data, we measured something, scientists venture to build theories by the weak method of extrapolation. And I just explained why is it weak. Because we don't know the variables and how they changed. The Rebbe is going to say this later. And from the consequent to the antecedent, extending to many thousands, according to them, of millions, of billions of years. I don't like it. So, first of all, we just have a little bit of observation, a little bit of time of observation. Second point is we're trying to extrapolate to billions of years out of small amount of observation. Point number 3. In advancing such theories, they blatantly disregard factors universally admitted by all scientists, namely, that in the initial period of the birth of the universe, conditions of temperature, atmospheric pressure, radioactivity, and a host of other catalytic factors were totally different. What I said before. Only if variables are exactly constant throughout the whole period of time, you can say the growth is constant or in such and such function and way, etc. But if something changes, forget it. It's going to be different. D. The consensus of scientific opinion is that there must have been many radioactive elements in the initial stage which now no longer exist or exist only in minimal quantities. Some of them, elements of catalytic potency, cataclystic, whatever, potency, I think you understand, of which is known even in minimal doses. So, wait a second. There were other elements that we don't have today, and everybody agrees they were found in those times, that might change everything. Variables change. The formation of the world, if we are to accept these theories, began with a process of colligation, binding together, putting together of single atoms, whatever, or the components of the atom, I don't know how to say it, and their conglomeration and consolidation, involving totally unknown processes and variables. That means we have no idea really how this happened. We don't know. You can say any theory you want. That's fine. But the point of the letter of the Rebbe is, any theory you say, it's very nice, but it's not a truth. It's not certainly that way. That's what the Rebbe wants to establish. Let's just put things in a proper place. That's why I wrote the definition of science and theory before. We're not dealing with truth over here. We'll see what that means later, truth. Now, you can say, I found fossils of animals and dinosaurs and all of this all around the earth. So what are you going to say? What about these things, these creatures? They are so long, much beyond 5,000 years. So the Rebbe says 2 points, very simple points. In view of unknown conditions which existed in prehistoric times, according to those theories of prehistoric things, etc., conditions of atmospheric pressure, temperature, radioactivity, as we know, as we mentioned before, etc., as already mentioned, okay. Conditions, that is, which could have caused reactions and changes of entire different nature and tempo from those known under the present day. Orderly processes of nature that we called orderly because we know them, we understand them, we have seen them for maybe 1,000 years, 2,000 years, whatever. One cannot exclude, on basis of that, we cannot exclude the possibility of dinosaurs existing 5,022 years ago. This is actually when the Rebbe wrote the letter, and became fossilized under terrific natural cataclysm. What is the Rebbe saying? Very simple. They were over there, walking in the earth. Whatever happened, I don't know. They died, and because of the processes that we don't understand and we don't know, they became fossils. And you look at them today and say, hey, it takes 2 million years, 60 million years, 100 million years to become like this. Wait a second, you don't know how the process was. Maybe there was some kind of process that generated this thing in much less time. Okay, second point. Even assuming that the period of time which the Torah allows for the age of the world is definitely too short to actually that process of fossilization, we can still really accept the possibility that God created really fossils. They were there. But why? The Rebbe says, for reasons best known to him. We don't know. But nothing stops you from saying, maybe God just created them over there. Interestingly, the Rebbe doesn't mention this in the letter, but there's an interesting saying. Rashi brings it in his commentary to the beginning of the Torah, that God says, Nase Adam, let's make a man. Let's, like you and me, or somebody else and me, let's do it. And the question is, wait a second, God is the only creator over here. So why is he talking of let's do, you and me, many? There are many answers to this, many. However, Rashi brings something very interesting from our sages. Our sages say, Rashi doesn't make this up, he takes it from the Talmud, whatever. Our sages say there's something interesting. He said like this. Look, I'm going to write the Torah like this, says God, so to speak. I'm going to write the Torah like this. Whomever wants to make a mistake, you're allowed to. No problem. Whomever is, so to speak, smarter and wants to continue thinking, just look at the next verse. The next verse says, in the day that God created the world. It says in singular. It doesn't say in plural. So why is it written in plural? In order to give room for a second thought. Why? Because otherwise, God would have created robots. We just do whatever God says. We don't think because there's no other way. So God created the whole creation, in a way that there is another way. Of course. I could be a good person, but I could just go on the street and kill people. What prevents me from doing that? The truth is, nothing. I could do it. I'm not going to do it. Baruch Hashem. But I could. Nothing prevents me. If God would have not created, so to speak, evil in the world, I wouldn't be able to do it. Because no idea of evil would actually enter my mind. There's no other way. It's just God. So God created the world in a way that you can choose between good and bad. In this particular idea, God created, so to speak, this is what the Rebbe is just saying, I don't know, but God created fossils over there. Why? I don't know. But you could perfectly say, because he wants us to try to understand what's going on over here. But the point is, nothing stops you from saying God created fossils already fossilized, like stones. Geologists, they check the world and the stones, and they say, the different ages, this happened in this age, that's why it's so low in the earth, etc. Very nice. God perfectly can create a world complete, which is actually, that's why I wrote down Chulin 68. Over there, the Talmud says something very simple. God created the world in a complete manner. Like, as we see it today, this is what he created, just as we see it today. That means that you could perfectly say, the world is how old? Is 5,000 years ago. However, God created it in a way that looks more, to the point that we say, actually our sages say clearly, that God created the first man like a person with 20 years old. He wasn't really born like a baby or no. So why can't you say the same thing about the whole earth? Now, last paragraph. As for the question, if it be true as above, be, like God created the fossils just as they are, why did God have to create fossils in the first place? The answer is simple. We cannot know the reason why. We don't know. Like a religious person doesn't have a problem with saying, I don't know. A non-religious person has a big problem. We will learn about this in a minute, but a non-religious person has a problem by saying, I don't know. Because if your whole system of living is based on your intellect, so it's a problem. When the intellect says, I don't know, either you're a fool, or you didn't learn, or you're in trouble. You can't base your life on something unknowable. You just don't know. You have to put theories, and they might sound very interesting, but you don't know. That's the bottom line, is you don't know. Even a greatest scientist, you can ask, and at the end of he doesn't know. He just thinks, believes, whatever, this particular way. So you can believe in a theory, you can think it is proper, or you can believe in God. What's the difference? The difference is that if you believe in theories, so you're not obligated, actually, just by yourself or your parents or whatever, you're growing up, you're raising yourself. You don't have to believe you don't have to be a good person. There's no reason why. Because you can do whatever you want. Actually, it's just cells and atoms going around the world. Okay, atoms go this way, that way, I kill you, you kill me. What difference does it make? And we have seen this not so long ago, 80 years ago, how rational people, smart people, what are you going to say? That the Nazis, their name should be erased, were stupid people? I don't think so. They were the most advanced, and the Rebbe said this many times, the most advanced civilization at the time. And they, intellectually speaking, came to the conclusion that you have to kill a whole bunch of people. Lots of people, Jews, black people, you have to kill homosexuals, etc., etc. All kinds of groups of people have to be killed. Why? Because we're higher. And it's not that they were crazy. No. They had a whole way of thinking, philosophy of why this is the right thing to do. Chas v'shana, God forbid, but this is what they thought. So if you're not based on God, on a higher, so to speak, superior truth, you're in trouble. So the scientist that denies, so to speak, God, not all scientists do. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying, comparing, if you just base yourself on science, or if you base yourself on religion, so to speak, the scientist has a problem when saying, I don't know, because it shows his lack of realization, so to speak. Your whole life is just knowing, and you don't know. The religious person doesn't have a problem with saying, I don't know, because we recognize that there's something higher than us. We don't have to know everything. This is basically what the Rebbe is saying over here, in different words, but this is what he's saying. We don't understand. And there's no way we can understand. God is infinite, and we're not. The fossils, so to speak, is not a problem on understanding that the world has 5,000 and more years, etc. Now, what I just explained before is found in this slide with different words. in a different shape, but it's basically the same idea. If you base your life on science, this is something I found, written, in this particular text. I did not read the whole text, no, but I just found this paragraph and I thought it was genius paragraph. I don't think this person, Wolfgang Schmidt, is Jewish or anything. It's just a scientist, whatever. You can look it up. I don't know who he is or was. I have no idea. But the idea that he brings is fantastic. It says like this: a life based in science, the denial of transcendence. That's what science actually means. Again, I have nothing against science. Actually, we can have a class. I'm sitting in Argentina and you're sitting somewhere else because of science. So that's good. No problem. And we use science. We get cured by medicine, etc., etc. That's fine. The problem is to base your moral and ethics and your decisions of life out of science. No, we don't do that. No. Why? Because science is basically the denial of transcendence. This is copied from that book. Desperate attempt to understand, this is not from the Rebbe. Desperate attempt to understand life on the horizontal plane of its manifestation. Now, again, I did not read the whole book, so probably the author in the book explains at length what that means. What I understand out of this phrase, and that's why I found it so nice, so interesting, is, what does it mean, horizontal plane? It means we're all the same. I'm not talking about religion. No. I'm talking about intellect, science. We're all the same. There's nothing above us. That's what I mean. There's nothing above us. It's just you, scientist, I'm scientist, you're scientist. Okay, let's talk, and let's get some conclusions. Maybe some people don't know science. Okay, they can learn, no problem. Everybody is in the same ball game, so to speak, and there's nothing above us. Nothing. That's what it means, horizontal plane. So there's no transcendence. Forget it. That's living according to science, so to speak. Now, if you base yourself on religion, you're actually concerned with transcendence. And we live, so to speak, in a vertical dimension. What does that mean? The way I understand it, what it means is we're looking to go beyond ourselves. We are concerned, so to speak, using his words, on what's actually beyond us. We recognize that there's something higher than us. And we want to actually reach that. We yearn to be connected to that, which is beyond ourselves. That's why it's called transcendence. Beyond the fact, I don't know, the scientists might be Christian or whatever, it doesn't really matter. It's just understanding the things right, in the proper way, independently of the religion he has or had or whatever. And then he writes something very, very interesting. The supposed merger, therefore, of science and religion, of these opposed doctrines, he says they are opposed. We'll see later what Hasidus says. Constitutes one of the most bizarre happenings in this already confused and confusing time. It's impossible to put them together. This is what he says. It's impossible. Either you work staying where you are, so to speak, horizontal, and the main point over here is there's nothing above you. In other words, you are God. So you can do whatever you want. You can say whatever you want, and you can think whatever you want, and you can... And if you happen to kill somebody, okay, so what do you want from me? We're all the same. Then the justice of each country is going to take care of this guy. Okay, that's a different problem, but not a moral and ethical problem. No problems. That's one dimension, so to speak. And then you have religion, of course, trying to go beyond yourself and having something superior telling you, this is the way says God, I want you to behave, because this is the way you will really reach your full potential. Okay, let's move on. What are the implications? We'll see a little bit more of the Rebbe's letter later, but what are the implications of all of this? Of believing that there's a world. We actually don't have to believe, you just open your eyes and you will see it, but believing that the world was created at some point. Actually, ancient Greek philosophy thought that the world was not a created thing, was eternal. What are the differences? These actually differences, these two, science or religion. That's the difference actually. Let's see. The Ramban, he lived Rav Moshe ben Nachman. He lived in Spain, 1200s. He passed away 1270 something in Eretz Israel. He was actually interesting. You probably know the story. He was kicked out. He had to run out of Spain because he won an argument with a Jew that actually negated Judaism in front of the king of Spain. He won. So he had to run out. Couldn't stay over there. Jews don't win, you know? Okay, so he wrote the whole commentary on the Torah. Very interesting commentary. Very interesting, difficult to read sometimes. But right at the beginning, he asks a famous question. Why does the Torah start with the creation? What do I care? Torah, it's a book of laws, teachings, laws. So bring me the laws. Don't bring me stories. Abraham, and I don't care. Adam, Eve, Chava, I don't really care. Just bring me the laws. So he says a very interesting, very important reason why the Torah starts with the creation. God created for this, one may object, etc. Was very necessary to begin the Torah with the chapter of in the beginning, Bereshis, God created, etc. For this is the root of faith. And he who does not believe in this and thinks the world was eternal denies the essential principle of a Judaic religion and has no Torah at all. So, having this in mind, automatically look at Bnei Noach. Do Bnei Noach have to believe in creation? The answer is yes, huge yes. Why not? Why is the answer yes? Because if not, you didn't understand what Judaism is at all. Like the whole idea, and of course I'm not going to go into the details, of Bnei Noach is, what's the message of Judaism for non-Jews? Of course, the message is going to be, in many places, in many fundamental things, like faith, the same. The message is the same. There's one God, and He created everything, etc., etc., as you probably know. So believing in the creation is not just something interesting. Yeah, I feel, the Rebbe is going to say, I feel the world actually has billions of years, but I love Judaism. You know what? It's a contradiction. You can't. Both things don't go together. I know, I'm conscious, there are certain rabbis that want to put the whole story of creation together with what the modern science says about the Big Bang and all of this, etc. I personally do not agree, and certainly the Rebbe did not agree either. Not at all. Not at all. For the Rebbe, a year is what we know as a year, a day is what we know as a day, etc., etc. And there are other letters of the Rebbe explaining different midrashim and explanations of our sages, the worlds that were created and destroyed, all kinds of things. But besides those things, what I wanted to bring out is the creation of the world, the fact that the world is a new thing. It's a fundamental part of Judaism. Without that, it's not called Judaism. It can be called something else, but not Judaism. And automatically, it affects Jews and non-Jews that follow, of course, the path of Judaism, according to them, etc., etc. So, the obvious question you should be asking yourself right now is, okay, well, where does the Torah say, how does the Torah say the world is 5,700, etc., years? Why should we believe what the Torah says? Maybe somebody wrote the Torah and that's it. So on this, there's a whole text, which is very interesting in itself. I'm not going to go through the whole text, but you can find it actually in English also in Sefaria. It's in the introduction of Sefer HaChinuch, the book of education. Very interesting text to read. He brings over there a very simple fact that I mentioned before. In the world today, we establish facts according to witnesses. The more witnesses you have, the more true, so to speak, is a fact. If you just have one person saying, I saw this and that, either you believe the guy or not. You have two people, 3, 4, 5, whatever, 100,000. The more people you have saying, I saw this, I witnessed this, the more credible it is. Furthermore, when these people are not just strangers, are your parents, your grandparents, and so on, going back in story, Judaism is based on the fact of the giving of the Torah, the event of God giving the Torah in Mount Sinai in front of 600,000 men from 20 to 60 years, which, if you think a little bit about that, it's more than 3 million people. Like each man, suppose they had one wife and 2 children, between 20 and 60, probably had more than one wife and more than 2 children. But you're talking about millions, 3, 4, 5 millions of people standing in front of a mountain, seeing and hearing whatever they saw and they heard, the Torah being given. And they passed this story, so to speak, generation after generation, until it reached us. And this is basically what Achilas was saying. This is another explanation from a different letter of the Rebbe, which I found very interesting. The source is over there, you can look it up. This is what actually Achilas was telling his uncle. You know what? People, the nations, don't really know. What does that mean they don't know? And this conversation happened a few thousand years ago. Interesting. They don't know. They just have proposed ideas that sometimes contradict each other even. Like some say the world was created not less than ta-ta-ta, and the other one says, no, not more than ta-ta-ta, and they actually contradict. It's just theories. So Achilas was telling his uncle, we don't know. Even when we have science, whatever the science was in Achilas' times, doesn't matter, but even if we have science and we actually see science working in many aspects of life, like rockets go to moon. Yeah, they do. Okay, so you need science for that. Even if we see it working in those things, it doesn't mean that their knowledge is true, that the knowledge is a fact. No, only what comes from above, that's a truth, that's a fact. And Achilas was telling his uncle, Judaism has clear knowledge. Even when you find arguments, the Rebbe writes, very interesting. Within Judaism also you find arguments. Wait a second, maybe this year doesn't go into the count, or maybe it go back and forth. Yeah, that's right. But it's only regarding 2 or 3 years. The Rebbe writes like that, which is insignificant compared to the lack of knowledge of the nations. This is what Achilas thought. Wait a second, I want to be part of this nation. I want to convert. Don't bother me. We don't know, and they know. We don't have certainty, and they do. So the Rebbe writes at the end of the letter, clearly the letter was not written for a non-Jew, it was written for a Jew. And the Rebbe is referring over here, hand and then head. The Rebbe is referring to tefillin. I'm not going to explain the whole thing of tefillin, doesn't really matter. It's a black thing you put on your head and you put in your arm. Okay, you can look it up in a different time, no problem. But so the Rebbe is actually encouraging this person that he wrote the letter to, whom I don't know, to put on tefillin every day. Jews put on tefillin every day. Okay, very nice. However, the point is, what's Judaism? Judaism is based on acceptance of higher truth, but not something that we think maybe it is this way. No, it's something revealed to us. This is the whole point of the giving of the Torah. There's a revelation of God telling us certain things, and the prophets throughout history, etc., telling us certain information, which actually is one of the fundamentals of Judaism. The fact, the idea that there is prophecy, etc. The Rambam writes this, in Maimonides writes this in his 13 principles, etc. You can look it up also. Now, the Rebbe writes like this, the true Jewish approach. What's Judaism about? Performance first, go do. With sincerity and wholeheartedness, like just do things. Of course, good things. Again, the Rebbe is referring to tefillin, but it applies to anything. Respect your parents, give tzedakah, etc. Followed by intellectual comprehension. Don't stop at doing. You should do, but then go ask, go find out, go investigate. And in the words of the Torah itself, na'aseh first, let's do, then nishma, then let's understand. If understanding in Judaism would not be something good, that the Jewish people receiving the Torah would have said, let's do, we will do, but they didn't stop over there. This is a very important point that Rebbe insisted many times. Yeah, it's true. It starts by doing, like blindly doing. Believe me, this is true. Yeah, but then I want to understand. Yes, that's the second step. Once you did, now go and greatest effort you can to understand. May this spirit permeate your intellect and arouse your emotive powers, intellect, emotions, etc., because it's connected to tefillin also, the head and the heart, and find expression in every aspect of daily life. For the essential thing is the deed. You have to go and do. But then, feel it. Understand it. This is what Judaism actually means. Now, according to all that we learned, that the belief in this, the story of creation and the creation itself, etc., it's fundamental thing in Judaism, and that we have to go and do, etc., etc. There's a very interesting, it's a class in itself, very interesting commentary of the Kli Yakar. He lived in Prague, 1600s, end of middle 1600s. He lived in Prague. Ephraim Alunjitz, that was his name. He wrote a commentary on the Torah, very interesting. And this is just a small part, very small part of the commentary. And the commentary is about why the first commandments, the first 10 commandments in Parshas Yisro, in the beginning, basically of the second book of the Torah, Parshas Yisro, have one wording, one text, and the second time in Parshas Vayeschanan, much later in the Torah, has different words, different things. And he goes on to explain a whole thing about it. Interesting in itself. Within all that commentary, there are these two phrases. Even those who are not on the Shabbat, that means non-Jews, should at least remember. Why? Because actually, as I wrote in the title of this slide, Shabbos means, for us, for Jews, means God created the world in 6 days, and the seventh day he rested. In other words, what I mentioned before, in the name of the Ramban, the belief in creation is a fundamental thing in Judaism. Otherwise, you don't have Judaism, you have something else. So let's go back to the Kli Yakar. Again, if Shabbos works as a reminder of the creation, not just 6 days and 7, like the whole idea of creation, and that's a fundamental thing in Judaism, what about Bnei Noach? We know perfectly they don't keep Shabbos. They should not keep Shabbos. The question is, should Bnei Noach believe, again, I repeat this, in creation or not? If Bnei Noach, as we established before, they should believe in creation, definitely. Nobody can argue this. So what about Shabbos? Why not Shabbos? If Shabbos, after all, means believe in creation. So creation, yes, Shabbos, no. Why? So he writes something interesting. Look at this. Even those who are not on the Shabbos, non-Jews, should at least remember. Because all nations must remember Shabbos in order to establish in their hearts a belief in the renewal of the world. What I just explained. Which will give, there's a mistake over here, God's faithful testimony about existence of the Lord, that he exists, that he created the world. Because it is part of the 7 commandments of Bnei Noach not to serve idolatry. He writes literally these words. So, do Bnei Noach keep Shabbos? No, definitely not. The Talmud is very clear on this. The Rambam is very clear on this. No, they should not keep Shabbos, but they should remember. What does that mean? We'll see in a minute. And even though they can't accept upon themselves the commandment of not to work in Shabbos, they can receive upon them the commandment of remembrance. What does that mean? Nobody knows. I'll explain in a second what I think. In which they too must have the renewal of the world before their eyes as a reminder. Again, Shabbos reminds you the creation, like a constant reminder week after week, at least one day a week. And that thing of remembering the creation, it's a fundamental thing in Judaism. So what about Bnei Noach? So he says over here, the commandment of remembrance. Again, there's no explanation to this. Now, one very important point before moving on. Point number one, Kli Yakar, it's a huge, important book, classical book, which is printed in most classical printings of the Torah in Hebrew, whatever. However, it's not a law book. And the difference is huge and important. He is not out to give out instructions. That's not his job, so to speak. His job is to explain, and actually the words kli yakar means a beautiful vessel. That's what it means, kli yakar. Like, wow, what a beautiful thing. Sometimes, not in every single commentary, but sometimes when he brings a very interesting explanation, like you say, wow, this is a beautiful explanation, he says, isn't this a beautiful vessel? Like saying, look, I just told you something very nice. And it's true, has very nice, interesting stories and ideas and etc. explanations. That's why it's called Kli Yakar. Now, he's not a book of laws. So when you want to know a law, you have to go to the books of laws, not to the books of drushim. Drushim means allegories and explanations and very interesting words and nice words and beautiful words. But wait a second, I want to see law books. That's point number one. Point number two, this is just 2 paragraphs of his commentary, which is relatively long. He writes a lot, but this one is long. Longer than usual. And if you read the whole commentary, comes out that even though there is some connection between the first story, so to speak, in Parshas Israel of the 10 Commandments with the non-Jews, there's no connection of the 10 Commandments in Parshas Vayeschanan with the non-Jews. This is what he wants to establish, actually. There is some connection between the non-Jews and the first 10 Commandments. However, at the end of the commentary, he leaves pretty clear. They were given to the Jews, not to the non-Jews. So, having this in mind, what does it mean, the commandment of remembrance? The way I understand this particular expression that he brings over here is that can Bnei Noach be aware of Shabbos? Yes, definitely. Can we say it's a different day? I'm trying to be precise with the words. Different day? Yes, you could say that. Definitely. Is there anything you can do? Yeah, we'll see in a minute what you can do. But there are certain things you have to be very careful. And it's a very thin line. When you start doing things and suddenly, boom, it becomes something else. It's a very thin line. So let's see. Practically speaking, what can you not do in Shabbos? You cannot refrain from work. Work means the way Jewish law establishes what's work for Shabbos for a Jew. There are 39 types of works of Shabbos, etc., which I'm not going to explain now. Doesn't matter right now. That's what you cannot do. Can you not go to the office because you believe, whatever, you don't want to work today? Yeah, sure. You can do that. Can you do that on Wednesday and Sunday? Yeah, you could stay home the whole week if you want. I don't know what you live on, but whatever. You can stay home also in Shabbos. Yes. Are you obligated to go to the office? No, not at all. But you cannot refrain consciously, with the idea of refraining from a specific behavior because the Jews refrain from that behavior. That you cannot do. No. Again, what are the behaviors? It would take me hours just to explain those behaviors. No, it's not the scope of this class. But you cannot refrain from that type of work that the Torah forbids for Jews. You cannot perform Jewish religious rituals, candle lighting, kiddush. Kiddush means to sanctify the day with wine, etc. No. Why not? Because that's a religious thing, and you cannot make up a new religion. For whatever reason, ask God, but he did not give Shabbos to non-Jews. And if you believe it's a religious thing for you, for a non-Jew, you're actually making up a new religion, and that's wrong. You cannot assign religious meaning as a commandment to rest on that day, like to Shabbos. There's one word missing over here. You assign religious meaning to Shabbos or to resting as a commandment to rest on that day. No, you cannot do that because already you crossed the line of making a new religion, making up things that God did not say you should do. So these things you cannot do. However, there are many things you can do. You can acknowledge the day as a special day because God created the world in 6 days, etc., as we spoke before. Definitely you can do that. You can relax. Whatever, you want to rest, you can rest, no problem. Interestingly, and we're not learning this in a deep way, etc., Rashi says you could not rest. Allah is not like this. Nobody actually agrees with Rashi on this, but this is what he says. You can not even rest. And not only on Shabbos, you cannot rest on Wednesday or Friday, whichever day. It's a very strict opinion of Rashi. Nobody actually agrees with this. The Rambam doesn't agree to that. Now, can you rest on Shabbos? Yes. Can you eat a nice meal after sunset on Friday? And or during the day on Shabbos? Yes, definitely. Like something nice. Every single person can understand nice meal in a different way, of course. Okay, but whatever in your system, in your life, is a nicer meal, not the regular one you eat, whatever, let's go sleep because I'm tired. No, something nicer. Yes, you can eat. Definitely. And I saw, interesting, you can even include a candle lighting on the table because to make it a beautiful meal. Now, what does that mean? Some people like candles on the table because it's nicer, romantic, or whatever you want to call it. That's okay. But if you're lighting candles because Jews light candles on Shabbos, even if you light it in Shabbos, that's not okay. No, definitely not. We're going back to perform Jewish religious rituals. No. So it's important to understand the difference. I like candles in my table. Now, if I don't like candles in my table, because in my family, whatever, we don't like candles in my table, but you know what? Today is Friday night, I'm going to light a candle. No, I think you're wrong. Now, if you do like candles, so you can light candles. Enjoy. No problem. You can learn better means in quantity, better means in quality, like take quality time to learn something you cannot have. You don't have time to learn during the week because of work or whatever. You can pray. You can take more time to pray. Pray better, quality, quantity, more tehillim, more psalms, etc. Definitely, this is something people don't know, but you can turn off the cell phone. And actually, this doesn't apply only to Shabbos. It's a very interesting exercise to do whenever you're with your children, which is a very difficult to do today, But just leave the phone aside. Now I'm with you. Suddenly you might find your wife or your husband. Yeah, really, we never speak, we never talk. We're always so busy on the phone. So you can turn off the cell phones and definitely you can say, I'm doing this because I'm resting on this day. No problem with that. No problem with that. Jews also turn off the phones, yes, on Shabbos, definitely, and turn off the TV, etc., yes, but that's not a religious act, so to speak. That's part of the laws of Shabbos. It's something you just don't do on Shabbos because it doesn't feel with the spirit of Shabbos, but it's not part of the laws of Shabbos. So definitely non-Jews can also do that on Shabbos. Why did I bring all of this? Because I think this is the practical implications of the whole story of Achilas. Why did he want to convert to the Jewish nation? Because Jews know when the world was created. That took us, so to speak, into this discussing a little bit of science. Why do we think and we believe and we know, etc., that this is the amount of years the world has? Science says something else, okay? We just made a difference between science and religion. And that took us to a practical implication of what can I do in Shabbos? Can I understand and acknowledge that God created the world? Yes, definitely you can do that. And just to finish, two perspectives. There's no right and wrong over here, just two ways of understanding. And then a third one of Hasidus, which I think is the best. But okay, perspective number one. Does Torah and science contradict? Yes, definitely. Two different things. In the words of that professor Smith, Torah works on a vertical line connecting man, whatever, to God. Yeah, this should be said man, not men. Women also. Allowing him, her, whatever, they to transcend his own limitations. And science works in a horizontal line. Forget it. It's a different thing. It prevents him from transcending. It's just tied, limited to your own intellect. Better or worse, whatever. So they contradict. This is what basically comes out of science, of this professor. Second perspective, no. They don't contradict. It's just two different worlds, two different subjects. Like bananas don't contradict apples. Just two different things. You like bananas, enjoy. You like apples, enjoy. They don't contradict. It's just two fruits, two different fruits. Torah and science deal with two different worlds. They don't contradict. That's why actually in the Jewish world, we do use science. Okay, certain things we might say this we don't do for whatever reason. But we do use science. Torah deals with spirituality and science with materiality. It's two different worlds and two different things not necessarily contradict. No, that's perspective number two. Then comes Hasidus. Hasidic perspective, I'm sorry, it's a little bit different. Hasidus offers tools to imbue the physical world with divine conscience. Like use and fill the world with God. Don't negate the world. Don't go out of the world. Don't just live on the world. No. You have to combine both of them because they both were created by the same God with the same godly purpose. If God did not want a physical world, why did he create it? We should just be spiritual beings, whatever, flying I don't know where. No, God wanted a physical world. That's why he created a physical world. However, he wants us, each one of us, to fill the world with his presence. How? Fulfilling the commandments, the proper things for whatever, it's 613 for Jews, 7 for non-Jews, ramifications, etc., etc. But this is actually the godly purpose of the physical world. So they don't contradict. They actually combine. They actually become one unique thing, so to speak. I don't know if you have questions. This is basically the idea I wanted